We are recording while people are trickling in. Let me go to speaker view. Hello, everyone, and thank you again for joining. I'm really excited. We have the one and only Jenny Anderson, and it was interesting because she emailed me out of the blue and said, "Hey, you know what? I'd like to get on. I want to talk about a few things and my journey, and I've learned so much from all sorts of stuff that's happened in my life, and I would love for you to share a little bit if you don't mind before we get going." And I said, "That sounds awesome." I was going to reach out to her anyway. I was hoping we'd get her into this group, and I asked her to give me a little bit of an intro. And she had a little bit of time in the car. She was going somewhere, and her intro is not a usual three principles intro, right? It's not she was gardening, and next thing uh, maybe I don't know how you got into the principles, but as far as the journey that she went to is very human. It's very like what you would expect with ordinary life for people to have, whether it's in their relationships or marriage or business or whatever. And so that's one of the reasons I really am excited to have Jenny on a call, because she hits home for a lot of us. And I think it's really important to not just talk about the lovey-dovey stuff and things like that. Not that there is no lovey-dovey story behind anyone that's speaking about the principles, but also mix the human aspects and what we've learned by knowing the principles. And I think Jenny does a wonderful job, and I'm so excited to have you here to share with us a little bit of what you've seen and what you're going to share with us. Now, before we begin, I do want you to share with us a little bit of your story, if you don't mind.
I came to the principles in 2005, and I'd been away traveling for a year in New Zealand, and it was something I did very often, was save up money, go traveling and try and feel better, try and find this person that I wanted to be. And I was always surprised when I'd get off the plane and I'd still be me and I'd still have my struggles. And I'd been home about 2 weeks when my sister said, "Look, I'm going to London. There's a trainer called Dr. Roger Mills. He's from America. He's a psychologist. He's going to be running a training. Do you want to come?" And when I asked her what it's about, she said she couldn't tell me. She didn't know how to explain it. And she had one of her friends, a guy called Blair, try and explain it to me. So he started speaking about principles. So then I was just more confused. But there was something about it that appealed to me. Mainly, I wanted to spend the weekend with my sister. And because it was a psychologist, I thought this must be good. It's not going to be some of the hippie crap that she'd taken me to before. And I never could have imagined really that I would show up on the Saturday feeling like one person and leave Monday night literally feeling like a different person. And the first day I was so nervous because we were asked to introduce ourselves. So for me, I had struggled with shyness, anxiety, depression, eating disorders, in my teens, using drugs and alcohol to try and make myself be more popular, make myself more confident. And I just struggled. And I didn't think there was anything else really available for me on my life. And then I show up on this 3-day training, and one of the things I think that Dr. Roger Mills brought to this was he knew that what your symptoms were, what you were presenting was not who you were, but they were stories. And he knew that underneath all of that there was this wholeness, which he spoke to as innate health. There's this innate health there. And I honestly can't remember so much of what was shared over those 3 days, but he felt like the first person that had viewed me as whole in a really, really long time. And it felt like an undoing of everything I thought I knew. It felt like an unraveling, a dropping of ideas and beliefs, and just a feeling of lightness. And it was preformed. in that I couldn't put it into words. It was before the words found me what happened, because it was like a shift from living in a world of fear and structure and form to a feeling of freedom. And I remember the drive home, got back to my auntie's house because she'd been on the course also. And then I drove my own car home, and I just remember driving and looking and seeing. And it felt like I was seeing this drive that I'd done a million times for the first time. And it was such a strange thing because my family, especially my dad, thought I'd joined a cult. They thought change doesn't happen that quickly. You're either on drugs or you've joined a cult. And I couldn't explain to anyone what had happened. I couldn't tell anyone what these 3 principles were. I didn't really know what they were about, but it was like the Jenny that I had been for all those years had just dissolved, and it'd been shown to me that it was a creation. It wasn't who I was. And I knew then that I wanted to share this with other people because it seemed too simple and too obvious to not be known. But I know up until that 3 days, I'd lived in the dark. I'd not known any of the stuff that I learned. And I saw that knowledge wasn't something to be memorized, or it wasn't someone else's words. It was something that is within us. And it feels like when someone points that out to you and sees that, like despite what you're presenting, despite your shyness, and you know, I was bright red every time Roger even looked at me. I was clammy, I was nervous, but it was, he knew I was all right. He was like, yeah. And he spoke to that. And it felt like I could then go away. And that's what I saw in other people, regardless of what they showed up as, is other beings who get lost in thought and don't know that's what it is. And it allowed me to see people as whole. And from that place, you have different conversations, your relationships change. And it felt like the greatest gift that I was given at 23 years old, to be pointed back inside. And then I feel like since then I've been on such a journey, because I was kind of desperate to get this out there. Like it had to be known, and there's almost an urgency in that. And then through the work, I met Rudy Kennard, my ex-husband, and he came up with the idea of making a documentary. Like, if this is so amazing, why doesn't anyone know about this? So him and I head off to America with new camera equipment that we don't know how to use, and get introduced as these videographers from the UK. And Jack Pransky, Linda Ramos, Gabriella Maldonado Montano, Amy Chen Mills really just took us under their wing and introduced us to people and had us interviewing. And we were there for 3 months, literally filming, doing trainings, sitting in on trainings, going into the prison system, going into the homeless shelters. And again, it was like that was an education in itself, because it's almost like I would have said this was true when I first came across it in 2005. 2009, I'm traveling around America and I'm seeing people in all different life circumstances. And it's like, oh, this is still true. It is true for everyone. And I feel like it really expanded and deepened my knowing in this to be true. And from that, suddenly, from being someone who sort of spent their life trying to be invisible, just to blend in, the movie site and the videos kind of made us quite known in the community. It was quite a small community, really. And I don't know, I feel like I created another kind of character. And this character was so much healthier than the one that kind of dissolved at 23. But it was still this creation that I got quite attached to. And it started to feel like a burden of trying to present in a certain way, trying to be a somebody. And like all of this is almost in hindsight. Like I didn't necessarily know it at the time, but I realized I'd created this other, this perfection that I was trying to be. Like if you understand these principles, then it's about coming across in this way or that way, and you don't get reactive because you see thought. And I hadn't realized how restricted I'd become again. And with everything that then happened with Rudy and myself, and the undoing of all of that, it felt like I got a deeper appreciation for Sid's message, and it humbled me in a way that I had so much more empathy and compassion for everyone again. Because I think in my mind, it was like, if only you understand the principles, then you wouldn't do this and you wouldn't do that, and that wouldn't happen in your life. And I think there's an arrogance potentially that had formed in me around all of that. And it was like, I always remember Keith Blevins saying to me, just a throwaway line, I think I was giving him a lift to an airport one time, he's like, thought will keep you humble, thought will bring you to your knees. And I was kind of like, yeah, but you know, we know about this thought stuff. And it's like, no, I got brought to my knees by this thought stuff. But in that time, the learning and the gratitude and the peace that ultimately I found. And it was like, one of my worst fears was people thinking badly of me. Like, I'd seen so much around the principles, my eating disorder had fallen away, I didn't struggle with depression. Rudy often used to joke, it's like, God, you've gone from being like one of the most unstable people I've met to being a really stable human being. But it was like, I saw that this isn't about stability, this isn't about a certain type of behavior, this is about the nature of all life. And I think I mentioned in the description that I sent to you, Amir, that it's like I've watched so much of my own ego that doesn't look like ego come and go. I've seen stuff happen within the community, and there's a lot of talk of all the politics in the community, and there's this way of sharing and that way of sharing. And I felt like the reason I maybe reached out to you was because, I don't know, I feel like whenever I've done trainings or whenever I've worked with people, and I'm wanting to get them in touch with their own voice, not my voice, not the three principles, not a way, like pointing them back inside to their own knowledge. And every single teacher within this community that I've met, worked with, learned from, I feel like they bring something to it, and they've got their own words and their own ways, and we can't not have ego. We can't not have an idea of what we think this is and share from that. But I feel like, I don't know, I've got so much gratitude for everyone. I've had so much love and kindness showed to me from people within this community, regardless of all the stories and the hype that kind of happened a few years ago. I've seen that people really are living from a space of, yeah, they get caught in ego, but they come back down and they reach out to you. And despite a difference, there's friendships and relationships that have lasted a really long time. And I don't know, I felt like there's nothing to defend with these principles. There's nothing to protect. But I've been finding myself more and more seeing the point of them, their value, their simplicity, the message. And I think there's been different times where people have come in and said, well, it's just like this, or it's just like that, or it needs to be simpler. But I can't, and I keep looking. Like, I've been so open-minded, and I've listened to so much, and I've been listening to talks on YouTube, I've been to other types of talks, but it's like I keep coming back to the simplicity and the totality that the principles offer. And I've been able to share this in different countries, and I've realized how, you know, when I was in Russia, they used a few words to describe consciousness because there wasn't a specific word in Russian that described that. So it was like, outside of the words, what is the message? What is that noise or that word trying to describe or point to? And I think one of the things that I keep coming back to with Sid's message was, go beyond the words. These are just words, this isn't it. And I'm not a big Facebook person, but I see so much discussion, and you see we get lost in words. We can get so lost in the words. But that message, that magic that comes alive for people, it finds its voice. It speaks through people in different ways at different times. I look at my old interviews now and I'm like, I'm not on board with that. but I don't take it down because I know that there may be someone who that speaks to. Like, because I was alive with something when I shared that. And the words weren't it anyway, because the words are my best attempt to describe something that really we can't describe. I don't understand. And I feel I know less now about the principles than I did in 2005, because I had such definitions for them then, and I defended them and I saw them as separate. Whereas now it feels they've come together as this one incredible something that I can't describe. So in some ways, I think I reached out to you just because I listened in on Dave's interview with you, and I've watched some of your other ones on YouTube. And Dave thinks so very highly of you. I thought it'd be nice to interact, but also just to let people know, like, the beauty that's here. And despite personalities and what can seem like politics, there's so much love and beauty in this community. I've never met such a warm community. Because I've had a few calls with people who have said they've almost been disheartened because they've gone online and they're like, do these people not practice what they preach? Because they've seen all these online arguments. I'm like, yeah, but we're just human. We just get lost in thought, and it doesn't look like thought, and we argue it and we defend it. And then we realise, and that's okay. You know, we're going to do that. But I do feel that there's something that we find with this message that keeps drawing us back to something that is true. And we kind of see our own creations or rubbish that we get lost in, but that's in a really gentle way, like in a not a judgmental way. It's just what we do. We're all right. So thank you for giving me the opportunity to come on and share a bit. I'd love it at some point, I don't know when you normally do it, I'm here to have questions and see if there's things that people did want me to speak to.
Well, Jenny, I have to say that was one of the best 15 minutes I've had in an interview, just listening to you. And I'm not just saying that, I'm sincerely saying that just because you said something. You said, I didn't take my videos down because something that I said back then was alive in me. So I'm going to keep that on. And I feel like I sense that aliveness in you right now too, just by what you're saying and what you're speaking to. So thank you so much for that. And I do want to ask you, with the confusion, with the ideas, because that's what we do as humans. I love stirring the pot because I kind of know that it's all just for fun anyway. So I make fun of people in the principles community and the non-duality community, and I love getting the responses, how they defend it, and how dare you say that about non-duality or the principles. And it's comical to me, right? But I do want to mention there are a lot of people on this call that they do take it to heart, and maybe they don't understand. They got a glimpse of the principles, and now there's arguments about how to say it, how to treat it, how to show up. In your opinion, what is the direction for people to look into? If you can give them some sort of idea, like forget about everything you've seen on Facebook, forget about all the arguments. This is what I believe is a direction to look into. What would that be?
I just want to say thank you very much for your Muji video the other day. Dave just came in and was like, you've got to watch this. It's so profound. And then he put it on and we're like, and then we're all just crying. Thank you.
Of course.
I remember saying to someone, one of my best friends, she was studying psychology at the time that I came across the principles, and about sort of a year in, she started getting more interested because this is sustained change. You know, she'd watched me go through college and watched me go and buy loads of food and puke it up. She'd watched me starve myself. She'd watched my weight go all over the place. She'd watched me get off my head on drugs and looked after me. And then suddenly she's seeing this stable human being who's doing life all right. And she didn't understand. And she said to me, if you had to sum it up, what was it that you heard on those 3 days? And I remember saying to her that seeing that I lived in a thought-created world, and that the reality I knew was constructed of thought, and that I was not and had never been a victim of my circumstance or my past. I said that was huge. I said that piece was huge. And I said the other thing that struck me was that there's something that we're part of that we can't put into words, that lives us, that is intelligent, that knows everything, is part of everything, is this energy. There's something that we don't know. There's something that I know in primary school was referred to as God. There was something about that I realized to be true. And it wasn't a religious thing. It wasn't the God I'd learned about in school, but it was like suddenly going from this feeling of isolation and separation to knowing that I was part of something far much bigger that I can't describe. But to start to see the thought created nature and construction of reality, I feel like is in some ways the same insight. They're two different ways of saying the same thing. We're living in the experience of thought, mind, and consciousness. We're living in the experience of God. We're living in the experience of this energy that we can't put into words. And the only way that we get to know that or feel that is via our own mind in this moment. And when we start to see that, this knowledge, this oneness that's been pointed to out throughout the ages, we feel that. We intuit that. We know that to be true. And the amount of people that have said to me, this feels like I'm being reminded of something I already knew. And I think that's the experience I had. This is reminding me of something I already knew, but I'd got so lost in construct, so lost in my stories, because our stories are fascinating. And there's a word that Dave used recently, which was mesmerizing. I was like, that is it. Our stories and our lives are mesmerizing. And I get mesmerized by my own stories all of the time. I find it hilarious, the things I get caught up in. But I know that they're a creation. I know that I've got lost in my own mind and the importance of it all. And that as that falls away, there is a space within us that just knows how to live. And I don't know, like I enjoy getting lost and then the moment of being found. So I think to start to get a sense that we're not what we think we are, that these principles are through words describing something that really you can't put into words. It's what created all of this. It created our ability to have words. And I don't know, I think it lightens people up, because life is going to happen. And like I mentioned, like there's been 14 years of my life almost. And in that time, I've had people that I love pass away. I've had financial difficulties. I've been married and divorced. I've moved. I've changed from my previous profession to a different profession. And there's life's happened, and there's been things that I've found difficult and things I've found easy. But it feels like this gives you something that allows you to navigate life and not take it all so seriously. And that's not in a disrespectful way, because I totally get how true and real this looks. Like we have the word for it, reality. It's our reality. It looks real. We're up against the same thing. But I'm also so grateful that I don't now walk around with, oh, I know I'm living in a thought-created reality, so I don't really love you. I love my thinking about you. Or I don't love that sunset. I love my thinking about the sunset. Like all of those things, is like we get to have real-time experience of life. And I used to want to transcend the human experience. Like I didn't want to be here. I didn't like life. I didn't like me. I didn't like the world that I had been born into. And I didn't want to be here. And it's like suddenly it was like, I get to be here. I get to play on this world and meet people and love people and lose people and make mistakes and trip up. And again, like I feel like I keep saying the word gratitude, but it's like gratitude for this human experience, for this experience of being able to see a separate self in a separate world. And to know that that is not what is true, that it's a creation, but to play in it is very different from being identified with your creation and feeling the victim of and a mercy of a world. So I feel like you start to see the thought created nature of experience, and in some ways to say that we'll think we know what that means. I don't really know what that means because it's this everything. It's life. But we can intuit that, we can get a sense of that. And it isn't in these words. Like a lot of the events we've done recently, we've had the word magic in, because to me, when I came across this was magic. I went from a world of suffering and feeling like a victim of my life to being like in awe and excited and hopeful again. To me, that's magic, because I didn't think change was possible for people like me, especially not people who had even worse circumstances than me. But I know now that's not true. So to start to see that we're more than what we think. What we think changes. Like, am I the construction that I was at 5? And the likes and dislikes. Am I the one at 10, 23, 33, and just turned 37? Like, well, if we were that, then which one are we? Because that changes. But there is something that's borne witness to that. And I'm really interested in that place, because that place hasn't got an opinion, it hasn't got judgment, it doesn't need. But I feel like I have a feel for that place now. And I do get lost in my constructions and my creations and stories, and I can laugh at it, and I can respect it, and I can see it in others and have compassion and empathy, because when you're in it, you're in it. But I can also know that beyond their story, they're all right.
That's brilliant. And I have to say that there is a space where I was doing the same thing, where I was going, oh, I'm not experiencing, that was a perfect example because I did that. I'm like, oh, I'm not experiencing the sun. It's in my thinking. But then I went, well, that's also a thought in of itself. Like, I don't know what I'm experiencing. And as soon as I put it in the words, that's not it. Maybe the sun is experiencing me. I have no idea. And I'm just part of the sun's experience. I have no idea. So that starts to become irrelevant. And the less words I have, the closer I get to the thing that I know is true. It's a very surreal thing. And and when other people sense it just by these conversations, they don't go, oh, I sense it because of these words. They just go, oh yeah, I don't know how to explain it. Me too. And that is the brilliance of this. So for those that are even considering sharing this stuff, right? Like Jenny mentioned, like right now, I'm not really paying attention to your words, Jenny. I hate to say this, and I know that's so cliche, but I'm listening to the aliveness of the space, the aliveness, the truth. And I don't know if you just naturally have it. It sounds like you didn't. It sounds like you were in your head a lot and all that stuff. And so I want to know more. And Pramila asked to living in the experience of, can you speak a little on that? And Pramila, I might put you on. Do you mind being on for a minute to kind of expand on that? I want to hear what that meant, what that means for you, because she heard something. I was going to see what she wants to expand on.
Living in the experience of, I hear that a lot. And then I tend to put it down to, oh, I'm living in the experience of my thought. I love what Jenny said, that when she summarized everything, that global effect of the me and everything included. And as if it's still me who's standing outside and watching. The totality when it comes in and we are experiencing, so everything is an experience. So is living in the experience of, is it just an idea of consolation for me? Or, I don't know, what is this experience we're living day to day? Like, a lot of times my husband, myself, and I hear a lot of, day came, day went. What did I achieve? And now recently I'm saying, well, day came, day went. I experienced it, it's gone. No regrets, nothing. It's another day. What are we talking about when I say experience? Am I not getting it? Doesn't really matter. What is it?
I can tell you what it means for me, and I'd see if that's helpful. But it's that idea of getting it or not getting it. It's almost like, regardless of whether we get it, again, I use the word, we're experiencing, we're here. And I think understanding the principles, I went from living in a black and white world to a world of multicolour. Like, I was so, like the other day, Dave and I lost our keys. I say Dave and I'll say that at the beginning. And I remembered that we did this, and then we did this, and then I gave you the keys, and you moved the car, and that was the last time that we had them. And I was like totally fixed on that. That was it. That was the experience. That's what happened. And then he was like, I'm going to go and check in the garage, just in case they're in that. I said, they won't be in there, because the last time we had them was, so I'm just going to go and check. And he said he walked down to the garage, and he said like a memory was coming back to him as he got there. And then he saw the bike pump. And then he was like, no, I knew it. I gave Jenny the keys, and she went and got the bike pump. And she brought it back. And then suddenly I have the memory. Oh, yeah. And I keep looking for that coat that I can't find. And I went and found that coat, and they were in the coat pocket. And I realised, like, as soon as we get fixed on something, like, I knew where the keys, I knew I hadn't lost the keys. So why do I even try and think anything else? That was all I could see, and I closed myself down to all other possibilities. And I got narrow-minded. And the thing is with this is, the word experience is a noise to describe this life stuff. And this life stuff is beyond me. I have no idea how this all comes about. I have no idea how this life stuff happened. Like, there's theories and ideas and scientific stuff, but it's beyond me. But I can say from a personal experience, I get to live and know stuff. And the principle seems to open us up to more possibility. We get less narrow and less fixed on thinking we know something, and then something else comes to us. So it feels like, in the experience of this greater intelligence that I don't understand. And we can say mind, thought, and consciousness, but to me they are this incredible metaphor pointing to this invisible power that some people call God, and some people call energy, and some people call mind, and some people call Great Spirit. And I always remember Dick and Bettinger saying, you know, it's something coming from nothing. Like this nothingness, this great nothingness, creating all. And what we experience will be where we focus. But I don't know what that energy is. But we have the word in English, experience, for this life stuff, whatever it is that we are experiencing or feeling. But I know that it will always be an after of this power. But it doesn't belittle experience, but it's like it's always going to be an effect of the principles, an effect of this energy. And one of the things I loved about Roger was whenever he'd feel the room get heady, he'd be like, right, we're taking a break. And he'd like send everyone off to get cups of tea, because he's like, we're never going to figure this out. Like, he's like, just take it off your list of things to do. Stop trying to figure it out, because you can't. we can't figure this with our intellect, but like we speak to, we intuit it, or we get a sense of, or life seems to flow a bit more, or it feels a bit easier, and I feel like that's, to me, was the best thing he could have said, because I don't feel like I've spent much time trying to figure stuff out with this. But the knowledge and the learning that's kind of come to me in unexpected moments has been incredible. It seems like the least effort of anything I've ever done, but the what comes out of it is huge. Does that make sense, Pramila?
Yes, definitely. Thank you. I love the how this life stuff happens. I love that. That did something, and we experience what we focus. That, yeah, definitely. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you.
Beautiful. Thank you. Let's got all these wonderful people. Any questions, any insights? Anyone want to talk about how good my hair looks today? That's fine too. It's actually a little bit off today, but what do we got? Anyone want to say anything?
Very down to earth.
Thank you. I think everyone's. What's that?
I was going to say, one of the things you said just before was, what would I say to people who want to share this or something?
Yeah.
And about a year ago, David said to me, what do you want to do with the principles, and where do you want to go from here? And I said, well, we did 5 years with Rudy. I did the facilitator training, and I said there's parts of that I loved, and there's parts of it that I didn't enjoy. But what I loved was working with people to help them find their own voice. And we could all try and memorize Sid's videos and share that, but it doesn't seem to do anything for people when we just regurgitate. And as you were saying earlier, like, it really doesn't matter the words, because in the early days of it, I really did not have any words, but it amazed me how many people I'd speak to would suddenly have these shifts, these jumps in consciousness, these insights. And I feel like if people share from what they've seen, and they don't try and sound spiritual or try and sound clever or try and sound like somebody else, just be in the moment with what you've seen, what is real life, what is everyday to you. And sometimes it might be the really profound statements that come out of you and you can't believe it. Other times it might just be stories or metaphors or a joke. Or one of the times I always stand out to me was the second or third retreat I ever ran. And one of our friends from America came along, and he was just going through a divorce. And he was sitting in on the sessions, and then sometimes he just couldn't face it, so he would go back to the lodge. And I came back to the lodge one lunchtime, and he was kind of curled up on the sofa. And I said to him, I never would have done this before the principles, because I'd have had a lot of thinking about what he might think it meant, but I could see he was suffering. So all I did is I went and got behind him, curled up, put my arm around him, and laid with him for about half an hour. And then he cried for a bit, and then he calmed down. And I remember at the end of the retreat, he said, I think I learned more about what these principles are pointing to on the second day lunchtime, when I was really suffering, and then came in and didn't try and talk to me about anything, didn't try and make me feel better, didn't try and do anything, but was just present with me and letting me be what I was. And I think that's the thing, like, the understanding seems to have allowed me to think less about what people are going to think or what I should or shouldn't say. I still do it sometimes, but more of the time. And I'm just with people. And I don't know, I think we know how to be with people when we're not thinking about ourselves and what we should say and what we look like and what people might think and what was that thing that other person said I should say in this situation. We're just present, and we know how to live there, and things occur to us. And sometimes it might be being quiet. And sometimes it might be leaving someone alone. Like, it's not a prescriptive thing. So I would always just say to people that if you've been touched or inspired by this, then just go and live. And you'll be amazed at how you just being in that around people is helpful. And words do find you. And there's been times I've had conversations and I've had no idea where it's come from. And I know that I got to film a facilitator training quite early on. And after that, my facilitation seemed to get worse. And after about 6 months, I remember having a conversation with a colleague, and he just said, "Are you trying to be like them?" I was like, "Yeah, they're so funny. And their metaphors are so good." And he's like, yeah, it's not going to work for you. Like, that's not how you talk. You haven't got all those clever metaphors and you haven't got that, but this is what you've got. And like, he points me back inside myself again. And it's so much easier. It really is so much easier just showing up as yourself. And there's been times when I've said, you know what, I'm feeling really nervous. I thought I had it all together, but actually I'm flustered. And it's like I've outed myself on stage, or I don't know, there's just real. The word real just keeps coming to mind. Just real with people. And I don't know, we're not experts. There isn't any experts in this. It's too big. So I always say to people, just share from what you've seen. I'm going to cough now.
You know what's funny? I had an epiphany this morning. I shared with my other group, my VIP group. The word presenting starts with present. I never thought about that. I never noticed that. When you're presenting, you're just presenting. You're just being present over and over again. That's all presenting is. And it just dawned on me. I'm like, I used to do all this work, and when I showed up with what I had anyways. And now I just go, well, let me just get rid of the 2 days of freaking out about it and do what I always do anyways, which is present or be present, right? And I think the reason you, Michael Neal, Dave, Jamie Smart are really good at what they do, because Jamie shows up as Jamie. Michael does a really good job of showing up as Michael. You show up really good at showing up as Jenny. And I used to think, oh, they're doing something special. And then finally I woke up to, no, they're just doing them. And they do a really good job doing what shows up for them. So I said, I can borrow that. So I just started showing up as me. And ironically, now people are saying, how do you do it? And it's like, I'm not doing anything. So yeah, I really hope people take heart to what you just said, what you just shared, because there is no secret to this. The secret is that you are already here. There's nowhere to go. That's where the conversation should start. And I don't know if there's anything more you want to say to that.
Sorry, I just muted myself when I coughed. No, I love that. I'd never thought about that in the words. We had a guy come to our retreat recently, and he had such a beautiful understanding of language, and so many words actually, when they're broken down, like you see the message they're trying to convey, but we get so stuck on the word and never get to the message. But it is cool when you have those kind of insights. And yeah, I just think it's so much easier than we think. Like, it's been interesting for me coming up and living in the north of England with Dave and his family, and it's a completely different family to my own in so many ways. And like the amount of thinking that he does about walking into a room of strangers and just chatting to people is zero, in my experience of observing him. I still have some thinking about that. I don't always find that easy, but I love it when those times happen where for some reason I've forgotten myself. Like, I've left myself at home that day and I do just walk into a room and chat to people and it's easy. But it's like, it's not wrong that I sometimes feel uncomfortable. It's not that he does life right and I do it wrong, because I've been such a bugger for that in my life. Of like, even, not even just in the principles, but seeing someone else's way of being in the world and being like, that's the right way to be. I need to be more like that. And then I'm always trying to get somewhere. I think you just said it, I mean, like, we're here, this is it, we're all right. There's nowhere to get to. And without that comparison and judgment, and it's so much easier. And without the need to be different than what we are. And sometimes our fumbles and our humanness can be what touches people more than anything we've said. It's like, oh, they're like me. They're not this kind of expert who has it all together. They're human too. And this being human, this word human, is like, it's a word, but it's what we've been called on this earth in English, and it's a gift. It really, really. I know I know that I've spent much of my life not thinking of it as a gift because I didn't like certain feelings and I was so terrified to feel. And everything that happened with Rudy and myself, and like I said today, God, it took me about a year to be able to say the word affair and not fallen in love with someone else, because it felt too horrible in my mouth, and I couldn't believe that I could possibly be married and then have feelings for someone else that just didn't fit into my idea of who I was. But I've shared more honestly about that experience because I want people to realise that these principles don't make us immune to life and to feeling and to, I don't know, to this humanness. And I've always been honest about it because I don't want people to be ashamed of what they think of failures or messing up. And like I've shared about my struggles with just guilt and anxiety and not being able to sleep. But the most beautiful thing recently was being at my niece's play. And there was like Dave and I sat there, and then Jules and Rudy, and all together just watching my nieces do the most amazing performance of High School Musical in their American accents. And I don't know, there's a couple of times I just sat there and looked across and smiled and just thought, thank God for what we know, because it has allowed our family to go through a really turbulent time. And it was even more complicated because my sister is married to Rudy's brother, so we're very connected. But it's allowed us to go through a very difficult time and remain friends and have honest communication and conversation. And I don't know, like somebody came to our retreat last year and she said, do you know what? The reason I came wasn't really because of the principles. It was because I saw that you'd managed to go through a divorce and an affair and all of that upheaval and still have this beautiful friendship. And she said, there's got to be something in this understanding that's allowed that to happen. And I wanted to learn more about that. And I don't know, I just feel like when I came across this, I really thought that when I understood enough, I was going to be perfect. And I was going to be able to help other people be perfect. And that came with a certain idea of what that perfection looked like. Whereas now, I think Dave someone said it today, then he said it to me, would you change anything? I said, no, I wouldn't change a thing, because I've learned so much through all of this. And I didn't realise how much judgment I lived in with people that did things like that. Oh, they must be certain type of, they obviously don't understand the principles. And it's like, wow, how easy it is to do that. And I feel like the principles is the ultimate permission to find this freedom in you. It's not a way, it's not a thing, it's not a script, it's a freedom. And I don't know why life has panned out like it has, but I'm so happy because I feel freer now than I've ever felt. You know, I've had all kinds of judgments and things written on Facebook and lost a few friends, but it's like I feel freer now than I ever have because I know I'm not dependent on any of those things or structures to be okay. So yeah, I just wanted to say to people, like, this isn't a prescription or a thing that you have to follow.
You know, while you were talking, it reminded me of a story when I got a big kick in the ass from one of my recovery center clients. I went in there and I was going to talk about being present, and I had 2 days worth of notes to be present, like all these notes, and I was putting them on the wall about what it means to be present. And one of them raised their hand and said, you sure do a lot of pre-work to tell us about being present. I'm a little bit confused. How does that work out for you? And the whole room laughed, including me, because that's what I thought is like, you have to prepare to be present. And I went, wait a minute. So I'm here as a principles practitioner, teacher, whatever you want to call me, and I'm here to share what's on my mind in this moment, yet I've tried to plan it for the last 2 days, right? And I didn't even see the nonsense of that. And that was my first wake-up call. And now when I walk into my recovery center and someone new is in the room, someone that hasn't been in my group says, well, what do you talk about? What do you do? And the people that have been with me, they say, he doesn't know what he's going to say next, and we don't know what we're going to hear. It's going to be a party for everyone. And that's literally what I'm hearing with how you've been showing up now. It's so much more liberating because the party is here. Right here, right now. This is the party. This is as best as it gets. Even in the worst times, it's the best that it will get because it's real. It's right here. And I know what you're saying. There is a sense of freedom from that. That's in a sense inexplainable for me. It just is very free, and people will see it whether you talk about the principles or not. They will see it. I do have, Sue Turner does have a question, and this might be very useful for people. She wants to know a little bit more about your thoughts about habits and phobias. She didn't say anything specific, but do you have anything to say about habits or phobias?
Sorry, I've just been dying quietly. It's funny because we see habits and phobias as something other than thoughts. And I kind of get it because I have habits of thinking and they seem more solid or more real than what should I have for dinner tonight. And they seem to come up a lot. But I think to me, starting to see them for what they are and not being so freaked out by them. I think if it's like people used to laugh when they'd have to, I hate bananas. Can't stand the smell of them, can't stand touching them. And I used to talk about it all the time. And as a teenager, I worked in a supermarket, I actually had to put my hand inside a plastic bag to move them. They were just disgusting. And I spent a lot of time focusing on that, and that was a problem. And it was a silly example, but it's been interesting because those kind of things have changed so much. Like things that I hated, things that I couldn't stand. Like I'm now like, oh, I can have them in smoothies. Oh, I can peel them. Like I haven't tried to not hate them and be despised by them. It's almost like the less we focus on what we think is a problem, the less of a problem it becomes. Sorry. So all I'd say is that I spent 10 years trying to not have an eating disorder. And the more I focused on it, the worse it got. And it seems completely counterintuitive to leave it alone. But Dave did this thing recently with someone where they were just talking about their problems. And he's like, look, and he handed them, say it was a mobile phone. It's like, right, tell me about it. It's like, oh, okay, it's black and it's got writing on it and it's got a case and it's a Samsung. And then he handed something else and it's like, okay, it's a piece of paper, it's white, it's got stuff written on it, scruffy writing. I said, interesting, when we focus on something, this mind stuff is so clever, it brings us more information about it. Isn't that incredible? Isn't that amazing? But all you're doing is focusing on your problem and being surprised that your mind is bringing you more information about it. But it's just what it does. It's clever. And I loved it because I just sat there and I thought, wow, it's the same with our problems. Like, I don't want to have this problem. This problem is so terrible. And our mind brings us more information about it. I don't want this habit. I don't want this addiction. But we did work with a young guy recently, one of Dave's friends, who in early December tried to take his own life twice in 1 week, and the second time slightly more serious. And we were down south, he was up north, so we came up and worked with him for 2 days and then continued speaking on the phone. And he has had this huge shift, and he'd been addicted to cocaine for 12 years. And as a teenager, his ambition was to be the biggest drug dealer in North England, I think it was. And we phoned him up. So this was early December. He had his kind of big shift mid-December. We phoned him up recently. We're like, how's it going with the cocaine and stuff? He's like, this is way beyond addiction and drugs. This is way beyond any of that stuff. And we're like, right. And we just sat back and we listened to him. And he saw that he'd never been addicted to a substance. He'd been addicted to thinking in a certain way. So any addiction or habit is a thinking pattern, is thought. And when you start to see thought for what it is, you take it less and less seriously. And the less we focus on things, the less our mind brings us information about them. But we're so used to trying to figure stuff out by looking at it. And it's sometimes in the early days, it seems totally strange to leave it alone. But that becomes more and more normal. Like if I've got an issue or something that I think is a problem in my life now, more often than not, I leave it alone. And that just makes sense to me. And the times that I do try and figure it out and focus on it, then I'm in the experience of that, and that's just what's happening. But I do know from the travels I've done, the interviews and working with people, that what people think their issue is never it. And again, with this young guy, one of the walks that we went on, David said to him, look, after about 20 minutes, half an hour, you're going to be like, what the hell has this got to do with my addiction problem? And then about 20 minutes, half an hour into this walk, he's like, what the hell has this got to do with my addiction problem? But it's like starting to understand the nature of your own mind, starting to see the nature of what experience is built from. All of those things that we do to change our feeling state stop making so much sense. And we get less afraid of our own experience, so we don't need to change it. So it's like you learn about something that's true, you learn about something that's constant, you learn about our nature, and all of the things that we thought were problems start to fall away, because they are, within the community, I've heard people say this many times, they're symptoms. They're symptoms of misunderstanding. So start to clear up the misunderstanding, and then those symptoms start to fall away. So it feels less and less relevant to talk to people's problems or issues, but teach them about the nature of their mind. And those problems and issues naturally start to fall away, or you see them differently. And it is that simple. But it's so tempting to get involved in our stories and our problems and our issues, because they're the ones that like have bright red lights around them. It's almost like, oh no, but do you remember, when you learn to drive, red means stop. It doesn't mean go ahead. So it's like leave it alone and learn about something beyond all of that creates all of that. I don't know if that makes sense, but it feels like it's leaving it alone rather than focusing on it. So that leave our minds alone.
That made 100% sense. That was beautiful. And we are almost out of time, and I wanted to read something and then ask you one final question, because we are going to go to my other group to talk as well. But Luis Danielle said, I had the most incredible 3 days with Jen and Dave that led to many incredible insights, and yet there are still times I almost get lost within the illusion and forget. It's like falling asleep and waking up again over and over, lost in experience and waking up to awe, right? And I did want to ask before we leave, the first part where she said she had the most incredible 3 days with you and Dave. What are you guys up to? Are you guys doing retreats? Are you guys doing anything? Can people work with you? How can they reach out to you?
So if they want to contact us, we're at info@freedomthinking.co.uk. We do retreats with people, intensives. We have a 3-day in May with Dr. Dickon Bettinger and ourselves in the Lake District. I think that's 25th to the 27th of May. But all the information is on our website. The other thing I was going to say is the guy I've been speaking about, Ed, with his addictions, he's speaking at our community group tomorrow night if people are interested to sit in and live stream on that. That will be on our website, or you can just email us for more information.
I'll upload this, Jen. Just shoot me a message, and I'll put both your website and the link to the call with Ed, and then I'll put that in the video, so that way they can find it right there. And folks, thank you so much for joining. This has been absolutely incredible, Jen. We both literally got on a call. She said, "What are we going to talk about?" We both said, "We'll just see what shows up," and it couldn't have been more beautiful than this, Jenny, thank you so much for for being here with us, and thank you for everyone that listened and shared.
Yeah, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Amir.
Thanks, and we're getting a lot of people saying thank you and brilliant, and yes, it was beautiful, and thank you so much, everyone. And we'll see you guys soon. This will be posted up soon. Take care.